Respected Professor Gopal Guru sir, Professor Sanil Mohan, Dr. Joy Ilaman, and other dignitaries. Good evening and welcome to K.R. Narayanan Birth Centenary Lecture Series. I am Dimli Divakaran. On the behalf of Institute of Parliamentary Affairs and Kerala Institute of Local Administration, I welcome you all to this program. This is the second lecture in the Sri K.R. Narayanan Birth Centenary Lecture Series. First lecture was delivered by Ambassador Shivashankar Menon on 30th October 2020. Today, Professor Gopal Guru will speak on the question of inequality. Professor Guru is familiar to all of us. Still, let me say a few words to introduce him. Professor Gopal Guru is editor of Economic and Political Weekly since 2018. Before that, Professor Guru was at the Center for Political Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University. He has also taught at the University of Delhi and University of Pune. Professor Guru is one of the foremost political theorists in India. His areas of interest include Indian and Western intellectual tradition, caste and related issues, political process in India, social movement, etc. A prolific writer, Professor Guru authored many articles and books. The most recent book is Experience, Caste, and Everyday Social, which is jointly authored by Sundar Saraikai. The Cracked Mirror, an Indian debate on experience and theory, Humiliation are some of the other important works of Professor Guru. Professor Gopal Guru's writings and interventions has brought many issues like varied aspects of social hierarchy in India, caste and humiliation, asymmetries of knowledge production in social sciences, etc. into mainstream discussion. It is an honor to invite Professor Gopal Guru to this series. With immense love and respect, I welcome Professor Gopal Guru to this lecture program.
Thank you, Dimpy. Thanks. Yeah.
Professor Sanil Mohan is the chair of this section. Professor Sanil Mohan teaches at School of Social Sciences, Mahatma Gandhi University, Kottayam. He was the director of Kerala Council for Historical Research till recently. Before that, Professor Sanil Mohan held many prestigious positions. He was Smoot Visiting Fellow in Commonwealth Studies, Clare Hall, and Center of South Asian Studies, University of Cambridge. Postdoctoral Visiting Fellow, Max Planck Institute for Study of Religious and Ethnic Diversity, Germany. Fellow, Social Science Research Council, New York. Visiting Faculty, Associate, Center for Advanced Study of India, University of Pennsylvania are some of them. Professor Sanil Mohan's book, Modernity of Slavery, Struggles Against Caste Inequality in Colonial Kerala, is considered as a path-breaking work in that area. With high respect, I welcome Professor Sanil Mohan to this program.
Thank you, Dimpi. Thank you for
Next, let me welcome Dr. Joy Ilaman, Director General, Kerala Institute of Local Administration, Matthew Andrews, Assistant Director, and their technical team. KILA is joint organizer of this lecture series. Many students, researchers, and faculty members are attending this program. Warm welcome to all. Thank you. To Dr. Sanil Mohan.
Good evening. I consider it as a great privilege to be here chairing this wonderful evening, and we look forward to listening to Professor Gopal Guru. And personally, for me, I think it's a great occasion because I've been learning a great deal of things from Professor Guru's lectures, books, and so on. I am very thankful to the Institute of Parliamentary Affairs, Trivandrum, and Kerala Institute of Local Administration for asking me to chair this session. So thank you very much, Dimpi Divakaran, and also Dr. Joy Ilaman and Matthew Andrews and all other academics and researchers and people who are listening to me. And as I said in the beginning, it's a wonderful occasion, and we all look forward to the lecture of Professor Gopal Guru. He will speak this evening on the theme question of inequality, which is very central to the research concerns of many of us, especially and also practically. All of us are interested in a more humane society and less inequalities in our society, and therefore it is a wonderful occasion and a great theme. And once again, I thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity, and I consider it as a great privilege. And I request Professor Gopal Guru to deliver his lecture. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sanal, for accepting to chair this session, and also Dimpy for introducing me to this participants of the webinar. And I also take this opportunity to thank the organizers for inviting me to speak. On the occasion of celebrating a birth centenary of Dr. K.R. Narayanan, I'm actually privileged to be asked to give a second lecture in the series. And I was actually discussing the title with Dimpy, the question of inequality. It looks to be very, very intriguing, if not ambiguous. What is it? What is the scope of this question? Should we delimit this question? I mean, is it the question that is empirical? Is it the question that is policy that has policy orientation? Is it the question that has political implication? So this was the surrounding meaning with the title. But let me explain to all of you that the question of equality actually has bearing on its conceptualization. We need to actually conceptualize inequality, and Sanal has already done a wonderful work on caste inequality, and there are several other studies on caste inequalities. But I am making a very modest attempt to actually make some initial efforts to explore the possibility of theorizing the concept as theorizing the experience of inequality. So that is my preface. I would like to delimit my understanding of the question to the need of actually theorizing inequality. As we all know that it is very rare in the discourse, either on philosophy or theory, that actually privileges affirmative language for its universal reflections and theorization. Therefore, we'll find equality is a darling concept that is taken on board for theorization, or justice, or freedom, or other affirmative ideas that actually deserve the first attention of the scholars, philosophers, and theorists. So I'm not starting from the top, I'm starting from the bottom. And those who actually are basically empirically and ontologically caught up in this question of inequality should necessarily start from the negative and not from the affirmative. That is my plea. You may not agree with me, you may discount my suggestion, but we require to really put in more efforts to really theorize the language which is considered condemned as negative. So that was my purpose to take up the question of inequality as a theoretical exploration. So, so therefore, I think I will not speak on what is the relationship between inequality and equality. Though we have, Dr. K.R. Narayanan, who spent his entire career both thinking, policy, and administration in terms of actually dealing with the issue of inequality. I have my own personal experience with Dr. K.R. Narayanan when he was the Vice Chancellor of Delhi JNU, when I was a student in the late 70s. Actually, he captured the question of the problem of inequality and discrimination that some students in JNU were facing. And I was the beneficiary of his goodwill and his support. So I don't need to explain in so many words as to how he worked. People like me, while we were studying in JNU for our higher level degrees, research degrees. And so I think the question of inequality has been the question which has attracted the attention of the policymakers, the thinkers, like Dr. K.R. Narayanan. And he was such a sensitive person to have captured and comprehended the problems which were very obvious, problems which were hidden. So I think we should pay our rich tribute to Dr. K.R. Narayanan for his complete devotion to social cause and scholarship that necessarily involve the study of inequality. So I think we start necessarily with deliberating on the question of inequality, and as far as we know, Sanal will agree with me that we really have little work on theorizing the negative concepts like injustice, inequality, humiliation, discrimination. We always take this as add-on vocabulary, as if this vocabulary doesn't have its own conceptual dynamics to explore into some kind of a theoretical promise. But I think we should really put in more efforts, intellectual, epistemic efforts, to see the possibility of exploring inequality in its all discursive dimensions. So that is one of the agendas of my today's talk. And so I think the relationship between equality and equality and inequality has been very clearly grounded by none other than Sir John Rawls in his work on theory of justice. And he actually, unlike the libertarian economists and philosophers like Robert Nozick and others, that they have in this particular discourse, libertarian discourse, inequality doesn't really enjoy any recognition. It's only equality which really enjoys a lot of focus of intellectual attention by the scholars. So John Rawls actually is defending inequality, and as this is a well-known maxim I'm sharing with you, because we are taught this in the classroom situations at different levels of BA, MA, PhD. Justice, in the justice discourse, inequality is actually defended as a part of the second principle in Rawlsian theory. As long as inequality actually works out to the benefits of the least advantage. That is to say, those who are actually privileged and more equal should actually share their talent, their position, their status, so as to benefit those who are underprivileged. This is the overall general thrust of the second principle. Can we really apply this principle, understanding the Dalit situation? Since I would be taking so much of references from the Dalit situation, are Dalits really following John Rawls and following his second principle? Are they not doing it? I'm leaving this question with you. You have to answer this question not today, but sometimes later. My quick answer is that yes, they are following. They are actually, some of them, most of them are actually using their talent to in such a way that the fruits of talents are also shared with those who are least advantaged among the Dalits. So that's how inequality is defended, in as much as it actually works out to the benefits of the least advantaged. So I will leave this debate here only. We can carry on this debate, but not on this occasion, some other occasion. My purpose is to really work out the possibility of defining, conceptualizing, if not theorizing, the social experience of inequality. Why do you want to? Why do you want? Why should we start from inequality? That is the main concern. As I mentioned to you that equality actually is a very promising principle. It's a universal principle. It can promise universal moral good of decent society, dignified society which will actually give some space for human being to flourish. So it's a concept which looks forward, and that's why the promise also prompts scholars to really reflect on equality and similar concepts which have affirmative thrust to their dynamics. And this is which is why we have in Indian Constitution all the affirmative concepts included in preamble to the Indian Constitution. So I don't want to repeat that. This is all well taken, and we need to have affirmative concept. But if you start from the top, which is called a tautological exercise, you might miss on what is given at the bottom. And inequality and negative concepts are actually lying at the bottom. We need to actually explore them, go underneath and explore them. So that is the purpose of actually starting with the concept of inequality. So what are the conceptual resources or conceptual vocabulary that can actually build up an adequate theoretical argument around inequality? I think there are basically three concepts, three additional concepts called discrimination, humiliation, and disparities, and the notion of disparity. All these three are basically based on the much larger notion of prejudice. So I will make interconnections among the three, but let's discuss whether we really have a tradition of actually understanding the nature of the concept of inequality. And I must share with you that in Babasaheb Ambedkar's theoretical writings, we have a clue of the concept of inequality, which is not actually the concept that is followed by others. Normally, we have we have a very mechanical understanding of inequality. We have gender inequality. We have color inequality or language. And there are different kinds of inequalities, which are legitimate, I think, in their expression and their origin. I'm not saying, but then they do not give you a deep understanding into the complex texture of this concept of inequality. So in order to get hold of this deep structure, we have to actually go into the other conceptual resources that are associated with the concept of inequality. If you don't do that, you run the risk of actually reducing the concept to the slogan or a shrill cry or some kind of a politically correct language that we have to use when you are actually leading the movement. So I think we have to actually rescue this concept from all these very instrumental, immediate usage of the concept, and actually encapsulate this concept into a much larger, broader meaning. Now let's see what kind of equality of what kind of concept of inequality we have in Babasaheb Ambedkar. And as we all know, in his seminal text on annihilation of caste, there is a reference to graded inequality. But we have not actually defined what is graded inequality. And he has himself defined it, but we have not paid enough attention. That is my humble claim. We have not paid enough attention to actually capture this theoretical take of Ambedkar on graded inequality. And he's defining it in terms of the social consciousness. And I'm just going to quote him, not verbatim, but his essence. So inequality is graded because it is ingrained in the social consciousness of a being. So what I am underlining, I would like your indulgence, is that this graded inequality is basically ingrained into your social consciousness. So I'm suggesting that, is it coming from your experience? Is it coming from your political economy? Is it coming from your text? Or is it coming from the argument which is already available in the discourse? So answer actually is, as far as I can see, I think it is coming from the formation of social consciousness. And what is the nature of social consciousness? Is it a progressive social consciousness? Naturally not. It's a very regressive, some kind of a obscurantist social consciousness associated with caste, gender, and other social infirmities. So inequality is graded because it is ingrained into social consciousness of a being. What prompts this consciousness is the need to apportion the opportunity in proportion to the aspiration of social groups. Let me repeat this point. This point is a little complicated, but I must. So how does one define, just paraphrasing Dr. Ambedkar's concept of graded inequality, this social consciousness prompts one, there is a need to proportion the opportunity, job opportunities, for example, in proportion to the aspirational social groups. I mean, you are actually, in a way, trying to control, monopolize whatever opportunities are available and monopolize them, keeping in view the aspirations of the social group. And so there are obvious examples of this apportioning your own aspiration to the proportion of your own social group is actually certain banking sectors are actually controlled by a caste from a person from a particular caste. Even nationalized banks tend to have that kind of a dominance of a particular caste. Going back as late as the early 20th century, that you will find textile mills were actually some sections were actually controlled by the upper caste people, and the Dalits were denied entry into those textile mills. So I think this is called a very, very limited rationale of inequality. That inequality is being organized around a very, very narrow rationale, that the opportunities have to be distributed among those people who belong to the same caste. And the skill, I mean, doesn't matter whether you have a skill or you have a talent, you have a skill, doesn't matter. Irrespective of all these modern requirements of organization, you can still establish your monopoly. That is, and then create forms of inequality based on not the rational principle which is universally applicable, but the principle which caters to the needs of your own specific caste interest. So that was actually the issue that Dr. Ambedkar picked up when he was actually trying to talk about graded inequality. So inequality is not seamless, it is graded. That is the difference. Seamless inequality will be universal in character, and it will be organized around the norms and competence, talent, which is acquired through open competition, and not actually acquired through very closed door entry, as we find. And so that's why Dr. Ambedkar was actually, in a way, criticizing this graded inequality. A second point that we have to take into consideration from Ambedkar is that the privileges that you get in graded inequality are actually shared across caste, except one caste, and that is the caste which is at the bottom, the untouchables. And I think Sanal's work is actually hinting at this caste as caste inequality. So only one caste which doesn't really enjoy any kind of privilege. Like the service caste enjoy privilege, they actually enjoy values, they enjoy recognition from other castes. But the sanitary workers, as they are now called sanitary workers, do not enjoy any kind of privilege, and they are at the bottom. So this kind of the norms and values actually are graded, and they are graded only up to the caste, along the caste which actually enjoy some relative privilege, and that those who are at the bottom, the untouchables, are actually deprived of this relative privilege. They only had negative rights, and as we all know, and Sanal has mentioned this, they had negative rights in the self-sufficient village economy. Negative rights to leftover food, clothing, and other things. So I think there was, I mean, they were not at all unequal in terms of the consumption, the aesthetic sense. I mean, there was no sense of aesthetic inequality in among the untouchables. I mean, that is the argument one can make. And this was because the inequality itself was watertight, graded, and not allowing people to actually share and enjoy recognition across caste. That is the second point Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar is making in his very important work on annihilation of caste. Now, so the point that one has to make is graded inequality is therefore against the modern, and if you want to add that word, secular inequality, in which you find that individuals actually compete for getting status, recognition, and their talent has to be recognized irrespective of their social origin. And it is over and above the social privilege of the upper caste, of the high caste. And so that is why we find the non-Brahmin thinkers are actually suggesting this. The point that I'm making is that, in modern secular inequality, you are actually enjoying seamless benefits of your talent recognition, irrespective of your social origin. And so, therefore, in a way, you may actually debate this, but in a way, inequality might look to be very, very individually progressive. Okay, you can debate this, but I think the neo-Marxists called the G.A. Cohen, and even I would not agree with this. We have to go beyond even Ambedkar, Phule, Periyar, Shahu Maharaj, everybody went beyond this. Okay, so that is the second part of our lecture. I will not cover this, Dimpy and Sanal. We can reserve it second time, next time. Okay, so so now the question that one has to raise today is, do women, Adivasi and Dalit and certain lower OBCs enjoy this seamless inequality? That's the question, whether it is Kerala, whether it is Maharashtra. You please ask this question to yourself, how far they are actually able to enjoy seamless inequality in terms of I mean, we have a very sorry experience that even the president is, and now we are talking about Dr. K.R. Narayanan's birth centenary lecture. I mean, what was the identification? I mean, in this seamless inequality, you are actually entitled to enjoy generic identity. That will say you can appear in public sphere without any specific identification, and you have that advantage. You actually drop your prefix of Dalit or caste whenever you are walking into new spheres of activity and opportunity. But that prefix doesn't really leave you. You are a Dalit intellectual, you are a Dalit president, you are Dalit all the time. So actually the point is that you are being reduced to this graded inequality. So the fight is against graded inequality. Or is it the fight for secular inequality therefore? It's a difficult question I'm asking, and I don't have answer. We have to search for answer in the writings of the scholars, the Dalit and the Shudra thinkers, and we can discuss this issue maybe in the next lecture. But this is the problem in our country, that we are actually invoking, we are not actually resorting to secular, but the graded inequality, and empirically you can prove that. For example, in the modern terms, each level is organized around different norms of efficiency. That's the point I'm making. Different norms of efficiency, skills, and knowledges. Adoption of these norms give modern identity to those who follow such norms. For example, Dalit government servants, officials who are allowed to follow these norms are entitled to enjoy the recognition that they are upright modern officers. This generic identity should become articulable without any reference to his or her caste background. These modern norms give a Dalit officer or a woman or Adivasi a status, advantage to status over the upper caste social privilege. So I think there's a tension. You get advantage in status over the social privilege that was historically by caste enjoyed by the upper caste. So Dalit finds it difficult to achieve this status in the event where upper caste treats his traditional social privilege much superior to modern status of a Dalit. And you can see Dr. Ambedkar, the kind of treatment that he was given by his own peon in Baroda office, where he was actually fulfilling his his obligation to serve as the officer in Maharaja Sahajirao Gaikwad's administration in the early 20th century. Knowledge in producing, caste-based inequality trumps therefore the modern forms of inequality. That's the point I'm making. Knowledge in producing both material substance and symbolic effects. I would like your indulgence in this. Knowledge in producing both material substance and symbolic effects tends to create differential unequal value system, both in terms of recognition and income. For example, and I would like you to reflect on this, and I think all those officials, I can see Mr. Joy Elman, who is also looking at me. I would like you to pay attention to this. Knowledge in producing both material substance and symbolic effects tend to create differential unequal value system, both in terms of recognition and income. For example, tanning the raw hide, tanning the raw hide enjoys less respectability than producing fine leather. And producing a cricket ball is considered relatively much superior to tanning and finishing leather. But they have different skills at different levels, and they are unequal in terms of producing these skills and talent. Yet they are actually at the bottom of the pyramid. I'm suggesting this point, why inequality remains graded and not becomes a universal, seamless, competitive inequality. I mean, this is a radical liberal program that I'm suggesting. So a cricketer enjoys, a cricketer on the other hand enjoys far greater recognition and income than the leather worker. But they still remain at the bottom of the pyramid without any privilege in income and recognition. Leather worker or tanner are unknown entities in the life of leather ball. I mean, what we remember in cricket, the ball which is hit for a sixer, not the ball which is produced by a leather worker in, for example, in Meerut. And thanks to the caste, which designates the value that creates a graded sense of inequality. Therefore, I think remaining at the bottom of the pyramid, irrespective of the modern skill you enjoy and you cultivate, you actually are reduced to graded inequality and not the open inequality. And therefore, I think this is the real problem, where you find graded inequality trumps the open inequality. So this is the part of the problem. Now, so how, the question is, how do you consider, what is the vocabulary? The discrimination is one basic idea that actually provides conceptual strength to inequality in order it to become the thought process, the part of a thought. So how do we understand discrimination? Have we actually, is discrimination an empirical fact, or is it an experience? Now the question is, how the concept of discrimination, how discrimination becomes a concept. What are its conceptual wherewithal? I was raising this point. Normally, we are taught discrimination is an experience. Discrimination is some kind of a immediate empirical reality. Discrimination is something which is a part of the process, but discrimination is not, it doesn't qualify to be a concept. All discrimination is a political act. All that is there, which is true. But discrimination also has its theoretical promise, conceptual promise. Discrimination is a concept because it has those properties, conceptual properties, created by an agency. To say that, and Sana, it will go very close to what you were doing in slavery. Can the slave get the sense of discrimination? And I think if it is absolute slavery without any hierarchy or sense of inequality, you will always find a slave lacking into this kind of a consciousness, some kind of a rebellion consciousness, some kind of a resistant consciousness. Because the situation for the classical slave is normal, it is normalized. So I think discrimination doesn't occur to him. And even if it occurs to him, it is not communicated to another human being. It is communicated to other almighty or mythical being. And as we find that discrimination was always communicated not to the people, but to the God. The Saint literature will always tell you this. So you require a very active, agile, agencyal initiative to really make a claim about discrimination. So discrimination, like humiliation, is a claim. You have to make a claim. And for making a claim that you are discriminated, you require a sound reason. Reason cannot be arbitrary. It has to be a sound reason based on your own experience, and that experience which is actually endorsed by others who are also participating in the process, in the process of producing reason. So that is the theoretical anchorage of discrimination. So once you see discrimination as the concept which is based on some reason, a claim and claim in turn is based on reason, you will find then inequalities, some inequalities are defendable, some inequalities are understandable. For example, natural inequalities, equalities in terms of height, in terms of color, are natural, and but then they become political, as in the case of US. But they are basically natural. So you get this naturalness because you are influenced, motivated by, not intimidated, motivated by a sound reason. So the reason has to be articulated in terms of discrimination by an agency. So similarly, inequality becomes articulable only because of this concept of discrimination. So discrimination becomes an additional, supportive, supplementary concept that will really actually provide enough explanatory ground for for inequality to become articulable itself. But now, when you discriminate, you have reason to discriminate. In the modern inequality, you have some reasons to accept your discrimination. And if you are actually discriminated on a very sound ground, I mean, how do I explain this? Capacity to participate is based on discrimination. Those people who have money, they only can participate in a market, for example, or in knowledge building system. Those do not have capacity. I mean, capacity is not given, it has to be cultivated. Conditions also important, that structural ground is always there, and we can debate on that. I'm not actually caricaturing or short circuiting the argument. We have to take due notice of this structural condition as well. But you have a capacity, and capacity is built up through your structural conditions. But if you don't have capacity to participate, you don't have buying capacity, you can't, you don't feel discriminated against it. You can do window shopping only. You have to actually take a subsidized satisfaction in doing window shopping, and you don't feel discriminated. Your claims to discrimination are eliminated progressively because of the reason that you have at your disposal. Now, but is this so in the hierarchy of inequality, for example, in computer exam system, you feel discriminated. You don't feel discriminated because you are reasoning out your discrimination, your loss of positions and all that. But discrimination which cannot be dependent on reason are the part of graded inequality. How do I explain this? This can be explained in terms of one or two examples. Let me give one example. That an untouchable, a Dalit woman, has capacity to buy good fish, for example. And how do we buy good fish? I mean, Kerala, since it is Kerala, I must give. I mean, there are other people also who are not the part of Kerala eating culture. You actually touch the fish, the raw fish, and find out whether the fish is all right or not. So touching the fish is your right, as you allow everybody. But in certain cases, Dalit women in a known situation are not allowed to touch. It is irrational. It is not rational. It is a part of graded inequality. You are already reduced to that kind of status, which is unchangeable. So when your status as a buyer or an enlightened consumer is not helping you, you actually are reduced to, you are actually vulnerable to face graded inequality. Or can a Dalit and now minority person buy house in a locality where he or she wants to buy a house, though he or she has a capacity? The modern principle of inequality and rationality is that those who actually fulfill and they agree upon the conditions of transaction, marketing, pricing, and all that, they should be allowed to participate in this, for example, housing market, without any consideration for their social background. Does it happen today? And as the experience of the minority people and the Dalit people show that even though they are capable of actually participating, they cannot buy house in a locality where they want to buy house. So what is this? So this is simply because there is a deep prejudice. A discrimination actually sustained, scaffolded by prejudice. And prejudice which is actually based on perception that these people are going to be a problem. They might use 89 Act against us. They might eat fish. They might eat something else. So I think let us not, or if they come here, we will lose other clientele. So all these are perceptions. Perceptions actually consolidate your prejudice. Prejudice ultimately lead to some kind of unreasonable, unsound discrimination. And therefore, you are actually producing new forms of graded inequality. The graded inequality that was talked about by Baba Ambedkar in the early 20s. This is the example of this is the interconnectivity of discrimination, prejudice, and inequality. Now, the last point I would like to mention is about the conditions within which we can actually articulate inequality. That's the last point I'm making. So the conditions of inequality, everyone knows those conditions now. Can we publicly talk about inequality? Yeah, we can talk about publicly talk about inequality only in the conditions which are tolerant, which are liberal, which are actually promoting some kind of a healthy, frank, candid dialogue, which actually are aimed at producing some kind of a future for egalitarian society, which are producing possibility of securing egalitarianism in this society and societies elsewhere. So you require conditions. We require to talk about it. You cannot actually take it for granted, or you cannot hide from it. You cannot even wish it away. You have to actually confront it. And that, as Dr. Ambedkar would say, you have to actually confront the disease. You can't avoid it. You just can't talk about a substance. We have to some symptoms. We have to talk about the cause. So we have to confront this, however unpleasant it is, however painful it is. But we have to talk. However embarrassing it is, but we have to talk about it. Unless you talk about it, you just can't really talk about the possibility of creating an egalitarian society where you have some kind of equality. Equality actually comes as the promise, as the utopia around which you actually organize your thought and action. And what kind of equality we will find out, not the libertarian equality, but different kinds of equality we can think about. So the conditions are important, and they are actually associated with liberal at the moment, a liberal atmosphere in the country. People should really have a sense of tolerance to really discuss, debate, tolerate, share views that are very uncomfortable, that are negative, but we have to actually talk about it. But conditions of articulating inequality. So the question is, can we therefore freely talk about it? Should the institution be talking about caste discrimination? Should we allow that debate to happen? I think we should allow those debate to happen unless we know our strength. How can we, unless we know our weaknesses, how can we build those weaknesses into strength? What will happen, unfortunately, we do not have good atmosphere conditions to really talk about inequality. What we instead have is the hoarding of equality. You go to when you go to international or national airport, what do you see? You know the hoardings of equality only. I mean, the hoardings are containing equality messages and the progress, development, this and that, strong nation, all that is flashed at the international or national airports. But beyond those hoardings, you have a stark reality of inequality, basically caste and gender and other forms of inequality. But one way of actually articulating inequality is a very deceitful way of actually hiding it behind the hoardings of equality. Okay? The other way is to talk about it openly so that you can actually discover the problems and actually find solution to that if you're interested in finding out solution. First of all, you understand. But there is a subtle way of hiding it. And you know how people, because of the pressures, hide talking about practicing inequality based on caste. While you are actually going for a rental house, when you are going to rent a house in a locality, you are asked difficult questions, very subtle questions, indirect questions to know your caste. And these people take a different indirect route because they are afraid about legal mechanism, social movements, and pressures. So there's a deceitfulness, but there is a very stark articulation, which is actually starkly grotesque. Sometime back, there was an advertisement that a builder put up a hoarding that only it's Agrahara. I think they have taken it out now because some people went to the court. But it happens. I mean, inequality based on caste finds its very, very grotesque articulation in a it's a complete stark grotesque expression of inequality. So talking about inequality becomes important. You have to give it a due attention or a due indulgence into talking about deliberating on inequality. And so I would say talk about it openly, write about it, and discuss about it, overcome it in terms of discrimination, prejudice, disparity, humiliation. And if you do that, I think this will be the best tribute that we can pay to Dr. K.R. Narayanan. And what else? I'm really impressed that Dimpy and his colleagues have organized this webinar on though I have suggested inequality, but webinar, and where I could really pick up certain thoughts on the notion of inequality. I think I should stop here. Sanal, I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We are extremely happy to have listened to your talk, and the lecture is open for discussion now. And we are glad that Professor Gopal Guru has delivered K.R. Narayanan Birth Centenary Lecture Series, the second one on the question of inequality. Dimbi, how do we go? You will read out from the chat box, or? I think there are some questions.
One question is about how ideas of Ambedkar and Gandhi help us to deal with inequality. Another question is about reservation, how reservation is going to affect inequality. If you can take these two questions, I can take other questions later.
What was the reservation thing? Gandhi, Ambedkar and inequality is very simple. That they are two, I mean, I don't have any great answer to that. Okay. That I will skip. Gandhi Ambedkar's notion. I mean, that's very. The difference between the two is that Dr. Ambedkar actually conceptualized it as graded. No, Gandhi hasn't done this. So we are actually talking about conceptualizing, theorizing. We are not actually eliminating inequality. We are conceptualizing it. So a person who is asking this question has to understand that our attempt here is to understand the conceptual take on it. So who has done this? Ambedkar has done it more carefully. So that much I can say. Because Gandhi has given thought to it. There's no doubt about it. And but the theory of karma becomes very important in Gandhi. And he's more on to eliminating, addressing it, and then theorizing it. That's my very humble take on this. And what was the second question?
The second question is about reservation. Do exist an effective remedy to avert issue of imagined inequality in India? Not imagined, ingrained inequality in India.
But that is, we have to find out what is the whether reservation is linked to equality or inequality. That question we have to answer this person who is asking this repeated question on reservation. The point is that when I made a reference to John Rawls' second principle, difference principle, one has to understand that reservations actually create more inequality. Is it not? That's why you have, but those are desirable inequalities, I would say. Unless you create inequalities, how do you know that you are unequal? And you have to fight. You become a role model. So if inequalities are creating role models in a very limited sense, we can defend them. This is Dworkian position. Okay. But if you say that reservation will establish complete equality, I have my own doubts about it. Okay. I will give you the straight answer to this. But they are good because they create role models, they create competition, they create aspirations. Okay, I can debate that point.
There is one question from Sashi. Can language of inequality be universalized? Which seems to be the effort of modern critical theory. It seems
okay, but I don't want to universalize it at the moment. Let us talk about Indian situation. If it is universalizable, I have no problem. Okay, but I think yes, definitely in terms of identity politics talks about equality as a politically correct business, not a theoretical consciousness. And that is the problem with the identity thinking. And critical theory, my problem with critical theory is that they basically base their argument on identity, okay, and difference. Now we are talking about universal language. Yes, we have a possibility of creating a universal language of understanding inequality, racial, caste, gender, language, all that we can understand. So there is a possibility. South epistemology of the South is a movement, intellectual movement, which is aimed at creating this language.
Nidhin Jacob Thomas asked that, do you pointing out that graded inequality trumps the seamless modern liberal inequality? Would you say, like Ambedkar did, this is another way of saying that social inequality trumps political economic inequality? That are only insufficiently modern, rational in our social relations? Or does it mean graded inequality mutates to even modern social relations? For example, if an actor is discriminated against because of his caste or religious identity, for film producers, there may be a capitalist, modern, rational behind it, in terms of marketability of identity.
Yeah, that's what I said. That's why I says, yeah, you still resort to graded inequality because you have a specific business in your mind. It's not a seamless, rationalized inequality, that you are actually selecting the actor irrespective of his or her social background. It is the talent, it is the creativity, it is the act of performing and comprehension of social reality. All that should count as the universal criteria for the producer to select a particular actor for a particular movie. You should keep the market in mind. Market basically, if it is a really genuine market, has to be universal. It cannot have a very limit. It cannot have a very narrow rationale while organizing the business, whether it is textile mills or whether it is the film industry or whether it is anything else. Yeah.
Dr. Kiran Agarwal asked that recently Maharashtra government took the decision to change names of the caste-based residential areas. How do you see this?
But is it a generalistic question or is it a theoretical question? I mean, this is a practical political question.
Yes.
What bearing does it on our theory of inequality? It should have some bearing, no?
Okay.
Yeah, changing caste names of localities. Yeah, you sometimes it will help you to actually deal with inequality and discrimination. Is right. For example, a person as a son of a Valmiki parent in Delhi was denied admission because his address was Valmiki colony. Okay, to that extent, it can really help you really fight instantly a kind of a superficial discrimination. Okay, but that people have different ways to know your caste. You know, even though you change your name of the colony, that is fine, which is good. Put up some good names which are driven by egalitarianism. They are the symbols of egalitarianism, decency, dignity, and all that. Okay, and all these names are actually they were driven by equality concern, egalitarianism. Samtanagar, for example. Why shouldn't we call it Samtanagar? But there are several nagars. Bhimnagar actually is Samtanagar. The content is important in the symbols.
There is a question from Gilbert Sebastian.
Okay.
Sir, you seem to focusing primarily on manifestations of inequality, especially the cultural dimension. Should we not emphasize equality or more the empirical dimension of inequality, like close interrelation between landholding and caste? So it is not an intersectional class analysis suitable to understand the complex society like India.
When I said I am not talking about that, I said that, but this is a usual rhetorical question that we should talk about land and inequality and all that. That is happening. And where is the question of land now? That people don't talk about land distribution these days. They talk about something else. When I said inequality is ingrained into your social consciousness. So I think one is actually talking about not simply some structural methodology, but also some kind of a phenomenological understanding. Unless you know that why a person is avoiding selling you a house in a locality, what kind of perception he has, what kind of moves he makes in order to avoid a person undesirable. How do you understand this? Will this structural methodology help you in detecting? The point is that you can just say, you can just rush to the conclusion, oh, this is because of the, you can finally reach that conclusion that because of the economic interest, the entry into the locality is denied. That no one denied. But to reach there, you have to have certain other moves, which all these given methodological parameters don't help you. That's why I mean Marxism actually is having problem with this whole thing.
There is a question from Adina. Whether concept of equity or equality should be emphasized to overcome the situation of inequality. Is reservation a privilege or a discriminative factor?
These are all old questions, Dimpy. They are just looking for answers, and answers have been given several times in the history. But questions never die. They keep coming. Is it not? Yeah, these are questions which are being raised for the last 40, 50 years. Yeah, so equity and equality, these are new terms. Equity is a very, very instrumental term than equality. Equality is a much, much larger term. Equity, of course, is something which is to do with instrumental economics, to which I think I would defer now. But reservations, of course, I have mentioned, reservations will always create more aspirations for the society, which will be based on equality and egalitarianism. Okay, you require to have some kind of limits. How do you understand the limits of inequality? You understand the limits of inequality when you are actually experiencing inequality itself. That is how Phule Ambedkar Periya's movement happened. They experienced it. Without experiencing inequality, I mean, experience becomes very important. Yeah, you can always go and work out big propositions about equality and egalitarianism, but you can only redeem that, realize that only you go through this arduous suffering process of inequality. And that's why you find what confronts you, not equality, but inequality. And you have to actually provide some kind of a theoretical understanding of that inequality. That's why you find language used by Phule Ambedkar, and basically Phule and Ambedkar is a negative language. Bahishkrut Bharat, for example, ostracize India, quarantine India. And what is this quarantine India? Is a concept or is the existence? All that we have to think, invest intellectually in these words, in these concepts. Okay.
One question from Rahul Misra. Sir, does reservation lead to humiliation as it focuses primarily on comparison?
Yeah, I mean, the reservations, again, John Rawls say, what does he say? What does he say? You are actually sharing the benefits and fruits of your talent. And what is the talent? Talent is, producing knowledge. The other one is that you are also you are also paying tax. If reservations is the result of paying tax by the privilege, and when the privileged person reminds you of that, you are, because of my tax, you are getting reservation, that is humiliating. Why should we remind people about the patronage that is given through tax pay? That is really humiliating. Yes, very much. But reservation becomes the rights. When it becomes the rights, then I think it shouldn't really entertain any language of humiliation. You shouldn't feel humiliated. Okay. That's a different debate. Is reservation a right? That's a different debate. We can debate it on. But academically, it can be a right, because you are the part of the system. I mean, the tax, the surplus that is produced by that is enjoyed by a person is produced by somebody else. So you just can't discount the contribution made by somebody else to make the accumulation possible. Accumulation by dispossession, accumulation by contamination, accumulation by different means, exploitation. So accumulation by exploitation, accumulation by discrimination, and dispossession. All these are, so the accumulation profit is not pure. It is the result of somebody's efforts. So if somebody's efforts is to be counted, you must give them reservation, just to compensate for their efforts. So therefore, there's a compensatory reservation.
One question from Kabilan. How much does the current pandemic and its impact weighted on the notion or consciousness of inequality among the common citizens?
Yeah,
for example, during the initial phase of forced lockdown, people of elite section were apparently expressed empathy with miseries of migrant laborers. How can we build on this form here? From this
No, but
here?
these are obvious questions, no, Dimpy. Pandemic has led to different kinds of inequality. One is the digital inequality now. Okay. As we have carried so many articles in EPW. I'm not really, I would expect people to read EPW and then find out what kind of inequalities have been produced during the crisis period of pandemics. It is there obvious. And the worst sufferers of inequality of access to resources is migrant labor. Poor people, very simple. Others people are getting foods on Amazon and other things, digital economy. And those who did not have access to digital economy, they were discriminated. This is a structural discrimination. It is inbuilt into the system itself, like education. Online classes are discriminatory because those people who are old on technology only can participate, others don't. Wi-Fi, electricity, other attending conditions are there. This is a long history of inequalities produced by pandemic.
We can take one more question, I think.
Yeah, I think it is. I'm also feeling tired now.
Okay, we'll take
one.
one.
I can just speak about it.
Last question, okay. How can we understand discrimination in practice against upper caste, economically weaker sections in India historically?
Who is actually practicing discrimination? You have to look at that force. Is it not? Are the untouchables practicing discrimination against the touchables? Who is actually doing it? It's state? Is there an unknown force? You have to actually comprehend the force. Then only I can answer this question. Okay. But there, of course, are they discriminated. But who is discriminating? The state, nation, other things we have to find out.
We will continue to have these questions among us, amidst us, etc.
I can answer them on email, Sanal. I can promise.
Yeah. So I think I request Dimbi to email these questions to Professor Gopal.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
And I request Dimbi, if you have an official, to propose vote of thanks.
Yes,
now,
sir.
Time for
I call Dr. Joy Ilaben to propose vote of thanks.
First of all, I have to thank Professor Gopal Guru for being with us today evening and a very enlightening talk. Especially I was interested and especially about when he talked about the capacity development part of it, because we as an institute and the Kerala Institute of Local Administration are into capacity development of local governments, where one of the key aspects as part of the 73rd and 74th amendment was actually ensuring social justice.
Yes.
And yes, and so we are supposed to be one of the institutions to.
You are doing very well, I can say that.
Yeah, develop capacity. So this was interesting and it was very useful for us for our future planning and future programs also in capacity development. Okay. So overall, let me thank you on behalf of the Institute of Parliamentary Affairs as well as KILA and all the participants here for giving such an enlightening talk, which is actually the need of the hour also. So thank you, sir. And then Professor Sanal Mohan, a friend and very close associate. Thank you for chairing this session, moderating this session. And Dr. Dimbi, who has been the real force behind this entire series of lectures which has happened for identifying the appropriate and appropriate experts in this field. So thank you, Dimbi. And finally, let me thank all of you who have attended this program. And also the kind of questions which come. We cannot take all these questions as answers to these questions because it will be a never continuing discussion, and that is how we move forward. So thank you all for engaging with this whole program. Thank you all. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. I also enjoyed talking to everybody. Thanks, Sanal. Be in touch.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanal, sir.
Yeah,
thank you, Gopal Guru, sir.
Bye-bye.